the Cabinet is meeting at the moment, and a sort of a directive went round all regional councils. I think I got one, I think on Thursday or Friday of last week, which is to expect an announcement today, presumably coming out of the Cabinet, that the Prime Minister will make. And essentially it's as a consequence of the resource management reforms, which we've been told are coming, which are meant to dramatically change the way in which this country orders itself, particularly in terms of consents, whether they are building consents, but mostly they are resource consents, and the numbers of plans that are all in this country, to reduce essentially the bureaucracy, red tape, etc., etc. And Chris Bishop, who is the resources manager, I think, from memory, but certainly in charge of resource management law reform, has indicated that it's ridiculous the number of different plans that we've got in this country: district, city, unitary, regional, with changes with all throughout the country depending on which particular council that you're dealing with. He's cited Japan as a good example of just having 8 or 9 plans for an entire country, and then you signing up to whatever one of those is by simply being designated as to what area you're in. He's also indicated much stronger, I think, guidelines from government to councils as to what they expect and what they don't expect. And those are expected to be announced, as I said, as part of the resource management reform package that is meant to be introduced into Parliament before the end of the year. Won't be passed through its entirety. But as a corollary of that, it is expected that regional councils will be abolished, because they won't have any particular role in the future. And some regional councils have been trying to preemptively strike that say, oh, wait on, if you are going to reorganise local government as a consequence of the resource management, ironically it should be regional councils that stay and everybody else should go. Well, joining to talk to us about that and what is known and what we might expect is the chairperson of the Waikato Regional Council. I think it's called Environment Waikato, isn't it? And that's Warren Maher, and he joins us now. Warren, great to have you on. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning to you, Michael, and thanks for coming along. We are still called Waikato Regional Council, so that name changed a couple of years back. Yeah.
So what's your locality? Obviously Hamilton, but how far sort of north and south do you go?
So we go right up to the Bombays in the north, all of the Coromandel Peninsula down to Waihi, across to below Turangi and up to the west coast at Mohaka. So quite a large geographical region.
Indeed it is. Yes, it is. And you've been in operation since 1989 when regional councils were first formed, along with most local government in this country. As you probably know, I'm an elected member of the Otago Regional Council. And we were told at the end of last week that we could expect our abolition. Is that your understanding as well?
That is my understanding, Michael. Yeah, I'm not sure what form it's going to take. There are a lot of rumours out there. Obviously, like yourself, we're all waiting for that announcement, potentially either today or tomorrow afternoon, by the sound of it.
Okay, and so what have you been told? What have you been informed? Where has that information come from?
So I had a meeting with a member from the DIA both last week and the week before. All they would outline is basically changes are coming. They haven't outlined that we're being abolished. They've hinted at potentially different types of structures. Some of our resource working moving up into central government agencies, and then some of it potentially moving downwards into the district council responsibilities. So I've even heard that potentially mayors would sit on the regional council or that type of structure. So there's a lot of rumour, and there's actually, I've heard no real truths at this stage, Michael.
Okay. One of the things that is being suggested is that there will be some sort of discussion document possibly put out. Are you expecting that from your sources, or are you more expecting a clear outline of the legislative program?
I think probably a hybrid. I think there is some discussion available to have in it, and probably from a regional council councillor point of view or chair point of view, the frustration is that we haven't been involved in any such talks to date. So again, that's what's leading to this great unknown. But my understanding is there will be some discussion. Obviously, the RMA documents are supposed to drop prior to Christmas. The rate targeting or rate capping legislation is supposed to drop prior to Christmas. So there's quite a lot of impact stuff that's coming out, going to land on our desks just prior to Christmas.
You would have been, is this your first term as the chair of Waikato Regional Council, Warren?
Yeah, it is, Michael. Yes.
Okay, so you were in an elected role prior to that though.
Yes, yes. So second triennium, first triennium as chair this time
Okay.
round.
So you've walked into this mess basically, if you like. Um, you poor bugger. And you're thinking, gosh, for the next 3 years it's sorted, and now it's not. Listen, the other thing is, I'm just interested. Is there a role for regional councils really? I mean, and the reason I ask that question is because I've got big question marks around that as a councillor. We know that to just down to your left is the Gisborne Unitary Authority. It's been one since 1989. Since the early 90s, Tasman, Marlborough, and um, Nelson unitary authorities. When they set up Auckland, it's one big unitary authority. There are only 11 regional councils in New Zealand. Is it reasonable to surmise that their time has been and gone?
Yeah, I'm not quite of that opinion. I definitely believe there's certainly space for some sort of amalgamation. Just your examples around Gisborne and Auckland, they tend to be city centric. And when you actually start talking to the regions around them, they do feel like they lose a little bit of their identity in that space. But that's sort of not my reasoning behind it. I mean, the raft of services that we do provide through resource consenting and into the maritime space and regional transport, we have iwi responsibilities. Waikato Regional Council has 5 joint management agreements with River iwi as results of settlements, and so it's the devil's in the detail and how they're going to unpack that and what the future for those services looks like is what I'm struggling to get my head around.
Okay. I assume though that in just what you've described there, um, local councils like Hamilton's big enough.
Mm.
But your largest, you've got what Thames, Piarco, and various ones, or Thames Coromandel, sorry, as well. It's quite a big council. Many of them could take on, could they not, the regional council functions?
Oh, if they were properly resourced in that, yes, you're right. I do believe they could. There are certain numbers that can, and I mean we're seeing them amalgamate. You know, the Three Waters has been the first of it. I've just stepped out of our Waikato Mayoral Forum at the moment to talk to yourself, and they are talking shared services and in that space. So, is there a regional oversight needed for some of those things? Potentially, yes, there is. But how that will look in the future, and what the government's idea of how that looks. We've seen after the deluge funding and that sort of thing come in and help build those flood and drainage infrastructure. The government's certainly looking more into that space after what we've seen, the damage that's gone on around the country in our storm events. So it's some of it's mountains to sea as well. So it does cross across various district boundaries. So
Mm.
there's got to be some sort of regional aspect to it. But what that looks like, is it something like a mayoral forum having a regional oversight and then dropping down into the different districts for various responsibilities within their boundaries? Potentially, that's what it could look like.
Listen, regional councils haven't exactly covered themselves in glory, though. It's interesting you just mentioned, um, the flood banks and things like that, and obviously Hawke's Bay would be, pretty close to
Yes.
mind. They've failed in their job, and there's no other way of looking past that, both in terms of their response to their event, preparing their people, and then they managed to stuff it up brilliantly again. You would have thought they'd learned the lesson, but no. The Otago Regional Council did a brilliant job of irritating the government by carrying on down a particular view when it was told not to, and so that required special legislation. Um, and then Wellington Regional Council as well, Woke Central. Is there a Do you think regional councils are the architect of their own demise? They haven't read the tea leaves, or they haven't done their basic jobs.
Certainly, there are certainly some examples of that, and the ones you've quoted, I agree. And I honestly believe, you as a regional council, you've got to work with the government of the day.
Of
There's
course
no
you do.
two ways
Mm,
about it. Yeah,
mm.
and otherwise you come up against them, and it's not going to get you very far. We have a small rate take in compared to taxes. And so we need that backing to help those services get done right across our communities. So yes, they have been the architect of their own demise in certain circumstances. We have a lot of technical information. We've just had an audit about to be presented ourselves and Tasman Regional Council to the Cabinet on our flood protection, our understanding, our drainage, how we communicate, all those sort of things. So we had a bit of a briefing last week, and it looks like Waikato Regional Council's come out of it fairly well. We do have a pretty good understanding. We do have a lot of assets in that flood space and drainage space, but also a lot of those have been put back in the 60s, 70s, 80s. So they need to be funded. Their upkeep needs to keep going. So there's work in that space. Whose job it's going to be, potentially in a few weeks' time or middle of next year, by middle of next year. At this stage, is anyone's guess, unfortunately.
Well, and that's something that is also I'm stunned by. I still remain, and that is civil defence and emergency management in this country. There was suggestions after Hawke's Bay that there was going to be a nationalisation of it. It's going to be run from Wellington. It's going to have much more structure and order. It's not going to be left to the piecemeal approaches of regional councils in particular, who took it on, I have to say, because they were given it as a result of district and city
Yeah.
councils not doing their jobs. Um, is that fair enough to you that there should be some sort of national structure, more of a government department than on a region by region basis?
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. Obviously, yeah, as a regional council, we're in that civil defence space, but it definitely needs a larger oversight and to make that funding available with more of a direct government agency input into it for sure. It is very piecemeal across the country. Some regions do it relatively well, others pretty poorly, as we've seen. So it's something that definitely needs big improvement because lives are threatened with this sort of thing.
Absolutely. Well, lives have been lost.
Lives,
Listen, the other
yeah.
thing is, it strikes me, and I've been sitting, this is my fourth term, believe it or not, on the Regional Council in Otago. So as you can imagine, I've been a fairly frustrated bystander for much of that period. But I've seen almost no cooperation between the regional councils in terms of sharing information, benchmarking, sharing staff, things like that. It's a very much a silo mentality that runs through local government. I don't suppose regional councils are any worse than anywhere else, but how are we going to get rid of that? Because you talk about shared services. Mate, when I was the mayor of Wanganui, we were talking about shared services, and that was over 20 years ago. We're not making an awful lot of progress. Does it need to be driven from Wellington?
The councils need a kick in the arse without a doubt. So we have a lot of staff interaction with councils around us and across into the Bay of Plenty, down into Horizons and things like that. But it's only the start of it really,
Mm,
and it does need to happen uh, in a far better way in a far quicker time. As you're well aware, local government moves really slowly. They'd rather write 100 reports about things than actually get something done on the ground. And it doesn't take much for a topic to come up, and you've already got reports in the closet that were written 10 years ago about these things. So we are guilty in that space, and it certainly does need to improve. It does seem to be a figure of conversations happening at the moment, but potentially that's also because of the indication out from central government that, hey, you guys need to pull your socks up and get better at things. So I think that is what's driving a lot of this.
I agreed. Listen, the relationship and another way in which regional councils perhaps have lost sympathy of this particular administration is their relationship, particularly with the agricultural and rural communities throughout New Zealand as well. I don't know your relationship with your rural community in the Waikato. Um, have you had issues around the granting of consents, the issuing of irrigation, and those sorts of issues as well?
Yes, yes. Look, definitely. I don't think we're any different from anyone else in that space. Obviously, we've got a massive agricultural and horticultural industry in the Waikato, and we are seeing things, water consents particularly, with increasing pressure on those resources. There's a lot of tension in that space. And then, we've been working away on this NPS for fresh water, and then all of a sudden it's pulled out from under us. The government can move really quickly in those spaces, but for us, it takes a lot longer for those wheels to turn. As an example, we ended up having to scrap a IT system that was going to deal with freshwater farm plans because of the changes in the NPS to freshwater. We wrote off $1.8 million. That's $1.8 million of hard-earned taxpayer and ratepayer money in that space. So there's definitely frustration in that space for sure.
Okay, and you're talking about the National Policy Statement of Freshwater Management. That's also expected to come out, I have to say, I think, with the resource management reforms as well, or at least the latest
Yeah.
iteration of. It got pretty radical in 2023 to Mana o Tawai. Was it 2021 or somewhere around there? Was it whenever it was released by David Parker, the then Minister of the Environment? You would have been sitting on the council on your first term then, and
Yes.
now
Yes.
that was sort of like, no, 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 water's more important than everything, including humans, and fish are more important than humans as well, which is I struggle to deal with. This one is much more of a permissive regime. No, we need to boost agricultural and horticultural production in this country, otherwise we won't survive. Those sorts of policy shifts, um, very, very difficult to deal with, I would imagine, Warren.
Yes, yes, they are. I mean, the aspirations of Te Manawa Tuai, the vision and strategy, they want the river to be able to be swimmable and food gathered from it, its full length, and that's great. But a lot of it is, these are altered waterways now, and that sort of thing. We've got to be realistic, and sometimes we go too hard over environment over economy, I think, and there's got to be a balance there. We're the food bowl of New Zealand throughout the Waikato and that sort of thing, and we don't want to be importing our food. We want to encourage the farmers. The government wants to boost the returns from the primary sector, etc. So there's got to be that practical balance, and sometimes we do lose a little bit of sight of that. We've got Plan Change 1 sitting in the Environment Court. That's been a 10-year process costing millions of dollars,
Yeah,
and we still haven't got it out of the Environment Court. Appealed on 1,000 points. Something's not right there,
no,
and we can't
you're
continue to do that
yeah,
sort of
no,
thing.
you're absolutely right. Listen, if okay, so regional councils and their future is unlikely. It's only a question of when they get phased out. I guess their functions transferred. Do you think though that this will set off within the whole local government sector the impetus for reform? Because I don't know about you, mate, but all around me, I've got small little tiny councils, 5, 6, 10,000 people, and I'm struggling as to how on earth they're going to survive and certainly assume some of the responsibilities that regional councils are taking at the moment. Do you think this kicks off a bigger issue?
Oh, definitely, definitely. I've got Otaronga District
A good
Council sitting
example.
in the Mirror Forum, and they're saying, we're a small population, we can't afford these big consenting costs, etc. We're not resourced. So if you're going to we see central government handing down a lot of things. Unfounded mandates have become a catchphrase in local government, but it's the resourcing of those, and whether it's taxpayer money or ratepayer money, it's coming off generally the same people. So these councils, their existence further down the track, I would say there's going to be some big reform around that space. And I guess it comes back into that shared services conversation again and what's going to work.
And again, finally, local government New Zealand. It's meant to be the representative assembly for all of local government in this country. It fell out really badly with half of its membership when the water reforms were introduced by Nanaia Mahuta. And I don't know if it's regained that confidence or not, but its job is to represent local government New Zealand, to lobby the central government on its behalf, to get some degree of understanding each sector of the other. Um, if today happens as you expect it to happen, or tomorrow, it's going to represent a massive, isn't it, failure by local government New Zealand to convince central government that its issues are worthy. Does that, in your view, question what local government New Zealand does, full stop, if it can't look after regional councils lobbying?
As you're probably well aware, I've struggled with local government in New Zealand. It's no secret. I moved for Waikato Regional Council to move out from the organisation. For regional councils, I find they are far too district council centric in that space. And again, there was a tendency not to work with central government of the day. So you can't, as we've just discussed earlier, you cannot have that mindset. You're not going to do, it's not going to do your governments or your councils any favours whatsoever. So the relevance, I was down in Wellington last week at Local Government New Zealand. There's been a big change in membership, etc. So waiting to see, but the tea leaves are there, the writing's on the wall. Things are going to change big time. And to me, lobbying and getting into your ministers and your MPs and stuff like that is hugely important in the environment we're in today. They need to understand, as councils, we need to tell our story better. I think from the population's point of view, they like to have a mayor, they like to have representation, but if that's not effective back up into central government, then we're on a hiding to nothing. So that's where it's sitting. And yeah, watch the space. There's some big changes coming, as we've just discussed.
Yeah, sure are. I'll be fascinated to get your reaction to them when they finally come out, Warren. Thanks very much for joining us today. I appreciate your time. Catch up with you soon.
Look forward to it, Michael. Thanks. I'll be in touch.
Okay, mate. See you later. Thank you very
Cheers.
much.
See ya.
Warren
No worries.
Maher, the Waikato Regional Council Chair, on the changes which have been announced. It'll be signed off in Cabinet today. Huge. How many people are employed in the regional council sector? Oh, probably about 10,000 to give you an indication. Now, they won't, so every one of them, so whether or not they're a consents officer or on the front desk, I don't know, the tea making lady, or this, if they still have tea making ladies, through the chief executives, they all know what's coming. To the officials have just been locally elected. The only question is when, where. But you've heard it. I think I broke the story for you on Friday that this was imminent. I'm just repeating that again today. I'm stunned that the mainstream media haven't picked it up. It's just unbelievable. But there you go. Why can't we interview our typewriters and talk to each other about is there going to be a non-existent leadership spin on the National Party instead, eh?